people who get locked into a vision. All right, that's it, man. That's their drive. That's their passion. Critics don't matter. This don't matter. They're going to do whatever it takes to be the best at what they do.
All right, here we are at the Table Talk. All right, here we are. EliteFTS Table Talk podcast from the S5 studios. We got a very, very special guest today. Episode number 53 with New York Yankees player, health, and performance man, Eric Cressey. Eric, welcome to the show. How's it going?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's great. We got a expert panel with us here today. We got Matt Goodwin and Nate Harvey. These guys have been with EliteFTS for a while. They're the vets in the industry, and they're also kind of the experts as it comes to, Matt says he's a baseball expert. So we'll see. And then Nate's our strength and conditioning guy. So
I like it.
Matt, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so baseball expert, I'm not quite sure about.
Expert.
Baseball fan, yes. Frustrated fan. Growing up in New Jersey, my dad gave me the wrong team. So we are Mets fans. Unfortunately, so we struggled through that. We did have 86 though. Eric, thanks for joining. Nate, thanks for tuning in from Buffalo. Eric, you're down in Florida right now. I hear the weather's awesome down there.
Yeah, lots of rain, but could be snow, so it's better off.
That's right.
There you go. So Eric, tell us what you're doing now. You run two facilities. You got one up in Massachusetts, one down in Florida, Cressey Sports Performance. And like Tim said, you're the Yankees Director of Player Health and Performance. Kind of give us a rundown of what you've been doing, especially through the whole COVID shutdown, and how you're trying to run two businesses and work with the mighty Yankees.
Yeah, so life is never dull, but it's especially not dull right now. We have the facility in Hudson, Massachusetts, and then we have the location in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, which is actually a new location we just built out in a public-private venture with the city of Palm Beach Gardens. So we're fortunate now we kind of have our own mini spring training complex with a 10,000 square foot facility. We've got cages, we've got mounds, we've got an 80-yard turf outside, we've got a full stadium. So we kind of have a one-stop shop for doing everything, and then obviously have like physical therapy, manual therapy on top of our strength and conditioning services, pitching coordinator, hitting coordinator. So effectively all over the years, we kind of built this, kind of a one-stop shop, like I said, where we really heavily leveraged synergy among multiple pieces of our staff. Pitching guys would speak with the manual therapist, who would speak with the strength coaches, who would speak with the PTs, and it all flowed pretty well. And it kind of became a model that in a lot of ways made a lot of our employees kind of good targets for professional organizations. So we saw our pitching coordinator, Matt Blake, who's hired by the Cleveland Indians. He's actually now with the Yankees. Now he's our major league pitching coach. So over the years, we actually kicked out a lot of employees that wound up going to professional baseball. We kind of joke that, I was the last one to fall. And so the Yankees approached me late last summer as they were kind of working through some reorganizations on the sports medicine, strength and conditioning front. So the title of Director, Player, and Health and Performance was created. It's something that, it encompasses a lot of different things. My specific category is, really largely in the strength and conditioning and nutrition side of things. We also have a performance science department that I work with, which deals with recovery and sleep and all that stuff. And then we have a Director of Sports Medicine as well. So I work closely with those departments, and we all put our heads together to hopefully put our athletes in the best position possible. My role is part-time with the team and part-time in a distance-based context, really working heavily on systems. So, right now, it's interesting. I was with the team in West Palm Beach when they were here to play the Nationals on kind of the day the world ended in mid-March. And you could kind of remember warming up in the outfield with the guys and just looking around the stadium. And it was right when the NBA had decided to close down, and we're looking around and there's a stadium full of people and you just have no idea who's sick and who isn't. So it's kind of a very surreal experience. But since then, we've really kind of reorganized. We've done a lot of staff education stuff. We've done a lot of planning for the amateur draft. And we've obviously worked hard to make sure that our players, who are all over. We have players in South America, we have players in Central America, we have players in Japan, all over the US, the Dominican Republic, you name it. So really just making sure that our athletes are taken care of and that we're gearing up for whatever comes next on the baseball side of things.
Cool. It sounds like you guys have like the farm system for the for people going to the next level when it comes to dealing with professional teams. How have you noticed facilities changing, both in Massachusetts and Florida? How are the states handling things differently?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think obviously the issues become somewhat politicized, and I won't delve into that too much. But certainly being in Florida, it's one of the states that has opened up a little bit sooner. Obviously Georgia was a state that opened up sooner as well, and whereas now in Massachusetts our facility still isn't open, so it's kind of a unique dynamic. And we've been pushing hard on some lawmakers to maybe give us a little bit more of an individualized approach to opening up. Right now we have a 15,000 square foot facility with high ceilings and 3 giant bay garage doors, and we can't train a single person in it. So we've had our entire staff on payroll, basically dating all the way back to mid-March, without being able to generate any revenue in the facility. And meanwhile in Massachusetts, they've opened up churches, they've opened up salons. So a lot of people are saying, hey, why are all gyms being treated the same? The big box gyms and the one-on-one personal training studios, and us being in the sports performance realm, or obviously somewhere in the middle. So we've kind of been pushing on some of our state representatives and Governor Baker to just give it a second look, think about tactfully, how can we open up safely? We want to do the right thing for our clients, but at the same time, we don't want to be, so heavily overprotected that nobody can come in the facility, and we want to just setting money on fire for rent and payroll every month.
That's right.
So it's different. And meanwhile in Florida, I kind of joked about it, but you if you just kind of drove around, you probably wouldn't notice it, aside from some people wearing masks, in the grocery stores, and everybody's there. But just day to day, the roads are busy. There are people on the roads. Like at our facility, there are guys outside playing long toss. There are guys taking BP in the cages. They're being cognizant of the social distancing and all that side of things. But, to the casual observer, Florida is open and people are being cautious. I think they're actually handling it really, really well, contrary to what maybe the national media has said. But it's a markedly different dynamic than what's taking place in the Northeast, whether it's Massachusetts or Pennsylvania or New York or New Jersey, whatever it may be.
Are you, Eric, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you having to, and it kicked me off for a minute, maybe you touched on this already. Are you having to do things at training camp differently than you normally would with setup and breakdown and having the guys in?
Yeah, absolutely. So above all else, and there's actually kind of multifaceted. So I say this above all else, my wife is an absolute rock star. She's been handling all this scheduling and just behind the scenes. I always have said in the past that every hour of training takes about an hour of planning. I would actually say that every hour of training right now takes about 2 hours of planning. Just what you have to do to space guys out, to make the facilities less congested. So I think that's the first side of things. Certainly from a cleaning standpoint, we always pride ourselves on how clean we kept our facilities, but now it's upgraded on a crazy level where every athlete has their own spray bottle. We're constantly sanitizing stuff. You never would thought that you have to go and spray down every weight plate, everything imaginable, because no matter how careful you are, there is going to be shared equipment stuff. So you have to do that as a staff. But I think the biggest thing that I think a lot of people are overlooking as we have to reopen is you have to retrain both your staff and your athletes, right? Your staff has to learn to coach without having to be right on top of people. I can't tell you how many exercises, you get in front of somebody while they're deadlifting, you say, show me the logo on your shirt, and you're literally 4 feet ahead of them. They're about to exert and blow air right in your face. You have to recalibrate yourself to where you're standing. You have to be cognizant of not having congested office spaces where there are entrances. And I've had to speak to our staff just about understanding, we're moving equipment around, things like that, just to kind of change the flow of the facility. But to be honest, I think the biggest thing, particularly in our realm, is I've had to, talk to 20-year-old kids about change your ways. You can't just give your buddy the bro hug because you haven't seen him for 2 months. You kind of have to just be a little bit more aware of it, whether you guys are both asymptomatic and, perfectly fine or not. It's kind of the message that you send. You want to establish a little bit of a precedent for, hey, this is, it's the new normal forever. It's just the new normal for a couple months. We need to be smart about this. And so you kind of have to be the bad guy a little bit. You do it tactfully, and you certainly want to be respectful of, customers that are supporting you. But, we have had to shift gears. And I think the other place we changed things is we modified a lot of our exercise selection. We would do a lot of manual resistance stuff with our athletes, rhythmic stabilization, end range holds, where there was actually a lot of points of contact with them. We scaled that back dramatically, changed things up so that there isn't nearly as much kind of person to person interaction in that regard.
Eric, would you
Yeah, that kind of sounds like the worst internship ever. Like you have to clean everything after every session.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like we pride ourselves. You want to be that third place, right? There's home, there's school or work, and then there's the gym. And you realize that there's a culture that goes with that. Guys want to bust each other's chops. They want to hang out after they're finished lifting, and you realize that you just can't have those, like, you know, it's like the water cooler chats and stuff like that, because, you know, if you do, then all of a sudden just the head count keeps piling up. And that's what we try to be cognizant of, because there are people that are going to be weirded out if there's too many people in the facility, and I want to be respectful of those kind of concerns.
Hey, how frustrating has it been? Because I think the problem with like a facility like yours, you're more of a private facility, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's got an appointment. Like, it's not you just people are coming in and out.
Yeah.
But you guys are all lumped into that big box gym. And I think that's what's really keeping everything shut down for most of these facilities. I mean, that's got to be your biggest source of frustration, I would imagine, right now, because you don't operate like those, like a big box facility.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, actually. Is so the state of Massachusetts, when they classify gym spaces, they have occupancy restrictions, right? So occupancy for an office, you basically allocate 100 square feet per person. So we have 3,000 square feet of office space. We theoretically could have 30 people in our office, right? Our gym space is about 12,000 square feet. And in a gym space, they only actually allocate 50 square feet per person. So we get 240 people in our gym. Like, even on our busiest seminar ever, I think we just went to like 220, and there was still tons of room to move around. We're literally asking, hey, give us like 5% occupancy. Let's bring like, 5 coaches and 10 athletes in, or something like that. We can open all the garage doors. We can go and make this as meticulously clean as possible. We can spread everybody out. Like, you can train in our facility without coming within 30 feet of another human. And they just haven't necessarily had any wiggle room in that regard, just because I think they had to paint with such of a broad brush. And where I get frustrated, and then this is, I don't want to politicize it at all, but, my feeling is that anytime you build a building, and we've built a building, we've done market renovations. On the day that we were supposed to open our first facility in Florida, the plumbing inspector came in and noticed the handle on one of our toilets was on the wrong side, so it wasn't ADA compliant, and she shut down our opening for a day. She pushed us back 24 hours over a toilet handle. So if you have some inspectors that are available to go in and do that caliber of meticulous checking, you have a fire inspector, a plumbing inspector, a mechanical/HVAC inspector. You have people that come in and see our fire extinguishers every year. They can easily swing by and look at your facility and say, you can open safely with 9 people in here. And the state of Massachusetts is also interesting, because it costs $520 per year to file an annual report in the state of Massachusetts. That's far and away the most expensive in the country. As a frame of reference, $148.50 in Florida. You get absolutely nothing for that $520. You basically pay to tell the state that you're still in existence. There's no reason those funds can't be reallocated to basically just sending people out to classify places as safe or unsafe, not essential or unessential, particularly when you've shut us down for 3 months already. So that's where I do see a lot of challenges with this, and it's not to in any way take away from how serious the situation is, or the people that have died, or the first responders that are putting themselves in harm's way. It's really just a matter of, like, I think we can do this very, very safely. We're meticulously thinking it out. We've already done it in one state, so we've learned all the lessons you need to learn. And I think that's where it's been challenging as a business owner, and I think a lot of people don't see it from that lens.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hard. I mean, for me to see it from a distance. I've got a lot of good friends in that portion of the country, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and they just can't open. And it's hard to see them. And I see some guys are really getting to the point where, like, oh shit, I'm going to lose my business. Like, everything I poured my heart and soul in the last 20 years is going to be gone.
Yeah, I think the whole discussion has been interesting in the context of kind of just this perspective on social responsibility. So, as a frame of reference, there are businesses up there that have been closed down for 3.5 months at this point. Even if they got paycheck protection, that's 8 weeks, which means they've been covering payroll for 5 weeks. And paycheck protection is usually not helping out the owners who are, basically paying the rent and trying to put food on their table and all that stuff. So it is kind of an interesting dynamic, and something that's unfortunately not resolved right now. If anything, it's probably even more frustrating, because it doesn't seem to have any hint towards a resolution. Even like they did move personal training up into a phase 2 opening, which is June 8th. With that said, they haven't really defined what personal training is going to be. So it's, I think it's been really, really frustrating. And to be honest, Massachusetts is the tip of the iceberg. I think when I talk to some of the folks in Canada, they're on a whole other level of frustration. They have no idea what they're going to do. And that's across the board. That isn't just one part of Canada. Like pretty much every Canadian strength coach I know right now is terrified.
That's crazy.
And you know what's interesting about this is, as it relates to the end user, so there's going to be people transitioning back that have been training from home or from a park or wherever. And now we're back on pieces of equipment that they haven't touched in several weeks. And, especially as it relates to the Yankees. I mean, they got bit by the injury bug quite a bit last year that probably led to some losses. And I think that's probably a main point that you're focusing on. So when you're working with these guys, I mean, is there any kind of timetable that you're using to determine, is there a shortened preseason that you have to work with? What have you done prior to leading up, and then what's going to be the game plan going forward?
It's funny. To be honest, I actually just devoted my podcast this morning to this. It was kind of just a solo episode where I kind of went, basically brainstormed on this front. But there's actually a pretty interesting precedent right now. So, certainly above all else, like it has to be safe. And the owners have put a proposal to the union. They've gone back and forth on those. And, I was one of the folks in our organization that reviewed it. So I've seen all 67 pages and it's certainly something that has to be the highest priority in terms of testing and all that. And what we also have to consider, though, and like I said, it's not to discredit how important all that stuff is, but we also have to look at the injury side of things, because if you bring players back, you ramp them up too fast, you have challenges as well. And there's some interesting precedents. Bundesliga, which is the German professional soccer league, they opened up not too long ago, and injuries were up 226% in the first week. You look at the Korean baseball organization, they've opened back up. They've seen a pretty dramatic injury risk incidents. Saw a lot of lower extremity stuff that's already happened there. And I mean, you guys are probably familiar. You remember the 2011 NFL lockout. There was a good study that came out later in the year. They showed that in the first 4 weeks of guys being in training camps, they ruptured 12 Achilles tendons in the NFL. The yearly average is 6 to 10 per year. So we saw way more guys. When you shorten a training camp and ramp guys up too quickly, bad things happen. What was interesting about that study is that a lot more of the ruptures happened in young players. I think we've historically thought ruptures happen in your middle-aged guys that go out and play pickup hoops when they're not ready for it. The average age of the Achilles rupture, I think, was 23.9 years of age, which is like 6 years younger than the normal rupture in an NFL player. So it's not the veterans who understand how to take care of themselves that are getting hurt. It's that young gun, who's super athletic and doesn't know how to manage it. So I think that's the concern. I know we've been really proactive about reaching out to guys. I think actually we're going to see a lot more general injuries than we are specific injuries. I don't think we'll see the Tommy John epidemic. I don't think we'll see the lat strains. I think we'll see a lot of hamstrings, a lot of calves, a lot of groins. Simply because I think most guys have been pretty good about continuing to throw, whether it's just playing catch, long tossing, or getting off the mound, or even just throwing weighted balls against the wall. I think what we're realizing is there are probably a lot of guys that were cooped up and didn't have access to fields and places where they could get out and sprint. You can make do with mediocre strength training equipment. You can do, goblet lateral lunges with a backpack in your house and stuff like that. But there's nothing that really simulates full tilt sprinting, running the bases, trying to leg out a triple. Those are the things that I think we need to be really cognizant of. Conversely, at the younger levels, I think we're going to see more elbows explode in 16 to 20-year-old kids than we've ever seen before. They're going to be trying to make up for lost time. They're going to be more prepared. They're going to be trying to showcase for scouts, college coaches, at a time when they probably should still be building up. So I'm actually more concerned about the youth levels than I am about professional players right now.
Yeah, that's concerning for sure, because in Ohio, they just opened up baseball, and you got these kids that have done nothing all winter. They threw them right on the field, and they started playing games last weekend. Yeah. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I've got a 17-year-old son, and I'm like, dude, you're not. We got to start all over again. We're going to take the summer off, go for your senior year. But I think that's going to be, you're right, the injury level, and especially explosive movement. So coming out of the batter's box, trying to get down to first base, trying to take off for a steal. Nate, you've dealt with these athletes, at the college level. Where do you start? I mean, obviously we got to be patient, right? We talked about that last week on this, but in Eric's case, he can't be patient. Like in a sense, I mean, they from what I'm reading, they want to get this thing going within the next 30 days. And I just don't know how. I mean, how would you start programming those guys, Nate? As far as, I mean, are you starting with a running program, a lifting program?
Some of both, but it's you know, you got to start at the ground level. And in my mind, like, I would almost think week one's like an assessment week. Give them a very base level of stuff that they can handle, and you're going to have guys that did stuff, but then on the other end, you're going to have guys that did nothing. So you got to kind of assess where you're at when they come in, and I hate to say it, like, make it specific to everybody, which is more work for the coach. You know, that's it. I've told every coach I talk to, I'm so glad I'm not in your shoes right now, because you guys are going to deal with a storm of this craziness. You know what I mean? So that would be my take. You know, start them off real slow, but you also got to kind of get them moving and get them ready. So you got to kind of assess everybody and go from there from week one, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, you guys were what, 2 weeks away from the start of the season?
Yeah, it was really close. Yeah, we had pitcher.
So are you going all the way back? I mean, how are you going to handle that?
No, I don't think you have to. And we had pitchers that were built up to 4 innings. We had pitchers that had gone back-to-back days as relievers. So, actually a lot of our bigger name, like, pro guys have thrown, 70, 75 pitch bullpens to kind of keep the work capacity up. So I feel pretty good about that side of things. I think, maybe you're a little bit more worried about some of the hitters who haven't seen live at-bats for a while. We've done some live ABs with our big league guys down here in Florida. And one of the things that you just hear from those guys is, like, 90 miles an hour feels like 105. Like, everything gets on you really quickly when you haven't seen it day in and day out. So I think there's that side of things where pitchers probably have an advantage. But I think the other thing that I worry about a little bit with hitters is the adjustability aspect of the swing. Like, that's when you see a guy who gets fooled on a changeup or something like that, that's where you get a shoulder that pops out, or you get an oblique strain or something along those lines. So we got to make sure that our hitters are reacclimated to some of the live BP aspect of it, at the right pace.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I mean, baseball, these guys are getting paid a ton of money, and the contracts are all guaranteed. And I think that's kind of what I was reading is, like, the biggest concern is, like, okay, how do we pay these guys? And especially if we're not going to let anybody in the ballpark. I mean, now you're not generating any money. I think I read something that was like, they're looking at almost like a $6.5 billion loss with just no fans being in the stadiums, even if they did a half season. So I mean, the money is just ridiculous, and it's crazy. And you're going to send these multi-million-dollar athletes out there, and like you said, go ahead and start, stop, twitch, move, and see what happens. It's a challenge, and even beyond just that's obviously a pretty hotly contested topic, and rightfully so. I think both sides have interesting perspectives on it. I'm kind of firmly, like, just kind of rooted in the middle. Just haven't seen it from so many different angles. But I think the other thing too is that we're also wrapping our head around what kind of support staffs we can have for them. Right? You can't just open the clubhouse to absolutely everybody. Some of the people are concerned about there are some coaching staffs that are older. They may have pre-existing conditions. I think they actually did a big interview with Dusty Baker, the new manager for the Astros, just about, he's older and, is he concerned about it? So there's certainly a lot of additional dynamics just in terms of what kind of support staff is going to be there. And to be honest, I'm still defining what my role is. We kind of have to wait and see what's going to happen as things kind of unfold here. So it's definitely unprecedented times, that's for sure. Yeah, you almost hit the double whammy. You know what I mean, with the private businesses, getting shut down, and then hey, I made some Major League Baseball, and guess what? We're shut down. So
yeah, I'm ready for 2021.
Right, just move on. So I guess for Nate and Eric, both you guys here. So most people kind of tune in. They want to know about programming, right? Everybody's like, okay, how do I train these athletes? How different do you train, say, pitchers, catchers, who normally show up early? They're going to throw the most. Catchers are in a horrible position all summer long, just absolutely brutal, versus positional players. Do you train them different? Do you keep them the same? How do you guys do that? I mean, Nate, I don't know how much of that on a collegiate level you guys had to deal with, but, I think there's so much information out there about football. How do you train football players? And I think parents are always kind of worried, like, well, you can't train my kid like a football player. But that's kind of like an interesting topic that I would like to kind of dive into. And how are you handling those different positions, and do you train them differently?
Yeah, absolutely.
Eric,
you want to go first? Go ahead, Nate.
So going back to what you were talking about, you're starting up in like 2 weeks. Like, because my perspective is I got some high school teams I'm going to work with. You know what I mean? So we got a couple months.
Yeah.
Like Matt said, you got 2 weeks. Like, how the hell do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is knowing that the best way to be ready is to stay ready. So we've been really on top of guys. I can tell you what each one of those guys has had during equipment access. I mean, I've had guys front squatting their girlfriends. I've had other guys that have, like Zach Britton's one of our guys. Zach has a home gym to die for. Like, you guys at EliteFTS would be impressed with. He's got an indoor mound with Rapsodo and high-speed cameras, the whole 9 yards. So, I think different people are in different situations in that regard. But, we're not going from 0 to 100. Certainly, there are going to be guys that are more prepared than others, and that's where the relationships, the conversations about where guys are at. We're going to do reevaluations for everybody and really get a meticulous, kind of a approach to understanding where they're at. But a lot of that's based on the relationships we built over the course of time and the fact that, we have been checking in on everybody like you wouldn't imagine. And that's kind of what you have to do. It's definitely, it's going to be a little bit more challenging at the younger levels where you almost have to assume they've all detrained and proceed cautiously.
So, like, your guys that you really haven't done much, you're basically going to try to have them ready to play. And as you go along, kind of microdose in their training a little bit and just slowly add things in over the course of the season.
I'm sorry, Nate, you cut out of me. I couldn't quite hear what you were saying.
So, can you hear me now? So for your guys that come back that really haven't done much, can you hear me now?
No.
I can't.
All right, we'll hang tight there.
I can hear you perfectly. I just can't hear Nate. Sorry.
You can't hear Nate?
Yeah.
How about me? Can you hear me now?
This is getting you back now, Nate.
Yeah.
I think basically Nate was trying to ask is for the guys that you maybe haven't had hands on and haven't been doing maybe what they were supposed to be doing. How are you getting those guys back into the swing of things? Is that where do you start with that process?
Yeah, to be honest, I think there are probably a few different capacities we got to really think about. First and foremost, one of the things that I've said is I don't anticipate we see a lot of specific injuries. I think we see more of the general stuff. I'm more worried about the guys who haven't been able to sprint, stuff like that, change directions, run the bases, all that. So I think we got to really make sure that guys are progressing their sprint work appropriately. Right now, if we only have a couple weeks before they report, they need to be doing stuff on their own, even if it's just getting out of sprinting at 70 to 80%. Like we've certainly encouraged guys to do that. The question is always, how adherent they've been to it. I know all the guys that I've been in person with have been doing it, so I feel better about that. But, I do worry a little bit more about the guys that we haven't been with in person. But it just means when we get back to action, we're not going to be running the bases at full tilt for the first week or so. We're going to gradually integrate the volume, the intensity of it, and test the waters there. I think on the pitching side of things, guys will probably shoot us straight a little bit more in terms of how many pitches they've been in their pen, and our pitching coach has been really, really good about checking in with them. So we have a real clear idea of how to progress them there. A lot of guys, honestly, will be a pretty quick ramp up. It'll be as simple as just get more batters in the box. I know some guys are throwing live already, so it may not be that big of a difference. It may just be a matter of building up pitch count and getting them in their 5-day rotations. So there's that side of things. And then I think the big one to watch out for is our hitters, starting to expose them to live at bats where maybe it's a lower pressure environment where they might see stuff at 88 to 90 instead of 98 to 100. So they can just start to adjust to things like that. Even if it's just tracking, that's going to be important. The other thing we have to really appreciate about the way it looks like spring training is going to go down is it looks like it's going to be predominantly inner squads. You're not going to probably race around all over Florida, Arizona to play other teams, particularly if it's let's say the Rangers go just to Dallas to do their own spring training. They're not going to just have other major league teams nearby. So what's probably going to happen is organizations are going to bring in, well in excess of their roster. Maybe they bring in 50 guys, and there's probably going to be a bunch of arms that are there just to give a lot of those players extra live at bats, simply because you want them to have a chance to see more of it. You don't want that to be the bottleneck. So, you obviously can turn up hitting machines and, crank them up really high on the velo side of things, and you can, spin splatters and curveballs at them. But there's nothing like seeing an actual pitcher where you have to appreciate deception and all that. So I think it's sprinting, throwing volume, and then it's looking at live ABs.
How do you, and this is more of a question for my own curiosity, is how do you simulate the adjustments? Like you said, if someone throws a off-speed pitch and the guy has to kind of, adjust to it weird. I needed to know that for my own sake, because the other day I popped up out of my chair trying to scare my kid, and I pulled my hamstring and it hurt so bad. I'm like, okay, well, how can I simulate that so it doesn't happen to me again? But I'm sure it also plays into, that's probably one of your biggest fears going into this thing.
Yeah, that's the element of unpredictability. But I think things just have to be, and they're very closed loop originally, right? Guys create the motion, they understand what's ahead, and over the course of time, they become more open loop. And there's progressions on that front, right? So, open loop is, hey, we're going to do a 10-yard side shuffle, go ahead and do it. A ground ball is a more open loop drill, whereas me pointing in one direction, say going as fast as you can, that's very open loop. So there's a continuum we have to work through in terms of what kind of response they have to actually adjust to. When do we add changes of direction, stuff like that. But in general, athletics is chaos.
I was going to say, so what I should do is just practice popping up and down on the couch.
Yeah, that's it, man. It's like anything else. You get what you train, right?
Yeah. All right. So when my wife asked me, what the heck are you doing? I'm like, I'm training.
Whatever.
Protecting myself.
So I'm assuming, with a lot of these, you're anticipating lower body injuries, especially with the positional players.
Yeah.
You can warm these guys up before a game, but in between innings, they're sitting. So, where's the protocol there? Are you going to have, they're going to be trying to stretch between innings. I don't know if they can get into the clubhouse and big leaps and get on a bike, or what do you guys do in that situation? Because I would think that's where most of these injuries are going to happen. You get that one long inning, these guys are sitting. They could sit for 30 minutes.
It's the truth. And that's something that's really going to have to be determined. We don't know what kind of access guys are going to have to those amenities, whether it's just space. The other thing is we look at most situations, like if you look at a major league stadium, a guy might have an at bat. He goes and he grounds out. He thinks he saw a pitch wrong or whatever it is. He's going to go back to the basically walk back in the tunnel. They usually have TVs right there where you can go and watch your bat right next to the cage. And a lot of those guys will, if you're going to pinch hit in the 7th inning, you'll go back, you'll warm up in the cage, you'll take some swings back there. There are foam rollers, there's a warm-up area, there's all that stuff. And that's at every major league park. You have a lot of technology access, and you certainly have access to amenities to get your body ready. We just don't know if it's going to be that accessible. We don't know if there's going to be space to move around, if there's talk about, players having to sit in the stands for social distancing. It's a crazy time. But I get it. They want people to be safe, and all that stuff. So I think we're kind of all waiting to get a collection of regulations that we're going to have to work with, and we kind of go from there. But yeah, that is a concern with baseball. I think the one thing you always have if you're a position player is when every time you go out and you take the field, like you have the option to move around a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? You can do some slide shuffle. You can run. You can jog out to center field. You can walk out to center field. You can do some Spider-Man with hip lifts and overhead reaches along the way. You can do what you need to do to kind of get your body in the position it needs to be successful.
Matt, would you mind sitting in the stands if you were a player, if it was dollar dog night?
Hey man, I'm a frustrated jock. If I could sit anywhere close to the dugout, I'm happy, man. Baseball's a big part of our family and our household. Nate, you've done a lot of research on like RPR, which has become quite big. Do you think that's something that would probably be a good idea to implement with these guys?
Yeah, definitely. Anybody that I've, myself included, kind of done that with has seen, benefits from it. So, yeah, it's quick. A lot of times, if you have a kind of a problem area, you can do the reset for that area and kind of get yourself going, help yourself move a little better for sure.
Eric, have you looked into that at all? Have you seen any RPR stuff?
Yeah, we've done some stuff in-house. Actually, my business partner, Shane, is a real rock star manual therapist, and he actually uses it as the foundation for a lot of his manual therapy interactions. A lot of times you treat those critical spots, and all of a sudden you get a little bit better downstream effect, and it makes the rest of your manual therapy treatments more efficient. So definitely something we've looked at quite a bit. And I personally need to get a little bit more delved in myself, but Shane's kind of been the team leader on that front, and you'll see elements of it if you walk into the facility on a daily basis for sure.
I'm sure if JL Holdsworth is listening, I'm sure he just
Love JL.
he'll be blowing up your phone here. I think
He's a
in
good
a couple
man.
hours.
I spent some time with him in Seattle last fall. He's a great dude.
He's an awesome guy, man.
Yeah.
But that stuff's real interesting to me too. I mean, I don't know a whole lot of the science behind it. I've seen it in action. I've seen some of the stuff that JL has done in person, and it's mind blowing. But I can see that maybe being something that a lot of these teams should probably look into. I mean, it's just it's some kind of cool stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, Eric, I guess back to where I was kind of starting off is it seems like everybody's got a high school football strength coach or there's some kind of program in there, but the baseball is kind of left aside.
Yeah.
Now, my son's just a baseball player now, and they're kind of it's up in the air. It's like, we'll just do what the football team did. I mean, is that something you would recommend? Because a lot of these high school baseball coaches, they have no idea, where to start. Yeah, they know all the arm stretches and everything else.
Yeah.
But as far as weightlifting, what kind of theories would you recommend, or what would you kind of see as being like maybe a simple program that's out there that somebody came in, this is something that we've used that kind of works?
Yeah, the first thing I'll tell you is, I think historically baseball has been maybe an underserved population, right? At one extreme you have just do the football program. At the other extreme you have just do the foo-foo rehab program. And there's a very good happy medium that you can come to where guys can be pushed incredibly hard as long as you're, taking into context the unique demands of the sport, their structural adaptations, things along those lines. And in reality, there's tons of different ways where you can take that traditional football program and really make it user-friendly, right? You can shift some of your Olympic lifting to maybe it's some trap bar deadlift jumps, or maybe it's a little bit more med ball stuff where you're training a little bit more on the velocity and the first velocity continuum. You can front squat instead of back squat. You can go grab a safety squat bar. We use them every single day. There's just so many different ways that you can easily bias that stuff. Instead of benching, go to a landmine press, get the scapula moving freely. And you realize that that's where, we agree on the 95% stuff and maybe we disagree on the 5%. The one thing I would tell you that I've learned over the years, and I'm going to tell you a cool story. So Tim Ferriss just interviewed Michael Lewis for his podcast. For those of you who don't know, Michael Lewis was the guy who wrote Moneyball. And he talked about the origins of Moneyball and why he wrote it. And it was originally supposed to just be an article. And he was curious to see whether higher priced players were resented by their teammates who made less when they didn't live up to their contracts, right? So if the right fielder's making $9 million, he boots a fly ball, and the left fielder is making $1 million, sees him do it. Does he think to himself, that guy sucks, why should he be paid that? So he started off looking at that, and he actually got involved in the game and befriended Billy Beane and got into the locker rooms. And he commented that he knew he needed to write a book about this when he saw some of the horrific bodies coming out of the shower in a baseball locker room. Professional baseball players with bodies that were not athletic at all. Right. And I would tell you that's the honest to God truth. But I'll tell you this: you'll say the same thing about professional golfers, guys that would outdrive any one of us, even though we can throw crazy weights around in the gym, and they go out and they hit a ball 350 like it's nothing. And there are a lot of reasons for that, right? It's the way they've conditioned their fascial system to store elastic energy. But the other thing I would tell you is there is a little bit of natural selection at play, right? If you look at a lot of those, and Stuart McGill has put out some great stuff on this. If you look at some of these elite rotational sport athletes, they tend to have spines that are very well conditioned for bending and rotating, right? They tend to have smaller intervertebral discs. They're not made for compression, right? Whereas you take, some of us, especially ones that have been powerlifting for years, you go and look at NFL linemen, those guys have big old discs. They're super conditioned for compression, running into people and squatting 500 pounds. They don't rotate well at all. And in fact, it's why you see a lot of offensive linemen in the NFL have stress fractures, because they go into extension and rotation and they're not conditioned for it. So what I would tell you is a lot of the things that we become so emotionally attached to in the context of strength and conditioning, even me as a former competitive powerlifter, you have to emotionally separate yourself from what you think strength training should be and what an athlete should look like. In reality, training rotational sport athletes is all about setting guys up for success in terms of generating and transferring force and rotational patterns, and finding clean layback of the shoulder, and leveraging all those different capacities at the same time. It's to be honest, it's sad to say, it's less about brute strength, right? I can get guys to a double bodyweight deadlift and 2.5 times bodyweight deadlift in a good year of training, and then all of a sudden I'm shifting a lot of my focus more to rate of force development, power, how well they display it, and how well they use it in different planes of motion. Yeah,
that's very good. Nate, what do you think about that? I mean, is that kind of along the same lines that you would kind of go about it? I mean, I know you get a lot of high school coaches reaching out to you, mainly on that football side, but I mean, they're still asking about the baseball. And I mean, is that kind of along the lines you would kind of direct them?
Yeah, definitely. You know, and especially at the high school level, you know, kind of lower level, the guys Eric typically works with, you can make a big difference just getting them stronger. But that's not to say, like he said, you can take that football program and probably pull a couple lifts out and substitute a couple things here or there, and it'll be a great baseball program. You know what I mean? So it's like Eric said, they get caught up on that 5% and nobody wants to touch it because it's what the football players do.
Right.
When the reality is 90% of that program is going to help both of those teams.
Yeah.
But there's probably some, you know, there's definitely some things you got to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Which is there's a good question here on my Instagram to go right into. Somebody asked, Eric, what do you think about overhead lifts for baseball guys?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is they're not all created equal. Myself is the best example, right? I've got a bum shoulder. It hates overhead pressing. If I do a military press with a barbell, I'll hurt for 3 months. It doesn't matter if it's the bar. It doesn't matter if it's 95. It just doesn't jive well with the structural change that I have in my shoulder. I can throw as much weight as I want on a landmine press and go to town, and it feels great. I do like a Viking press or Pentagon bar, whatever it is, it feels fine. And we're literally talking about a shift of the vector or the resistance of 20 to 30 degrees, and it's completely fine for me. I can get all the same training benefits. I probably get better scapular upward rotation. But because that vector is different, I'm totally fine. So what I talk about is, you know, overhead lifts are not all created equal, right? A bottoms up kettlebell waiter's walk is an overhead lift. A TRXY is an overhead lift. A Turkish get up is an overhead lift. A yoga push up is technically an overhead lift. So I would tell you, we do a ton of them. We just use the right kinds. You know, I like them because they drive the movement of the shoulder blade that we really need to be efficient as an overhead athlete. What we're not doing is a lot of just like barbell push presses, dumbbell push presses. Like very rarely we train directly in that vertical vector. A lot more of it is like stuff that allows us to reach as we go overhead, similar to what you would expect to get to at like a ball release position or something along those lines. But our arms are overhead a lot. And if you need proof, literally just walk into any baseball locker room and look for how many downslope shoulders you see. Guys whose shoulders just kind of go like this. You can't even see their upper traps, and they've been lifting for years. It's because they sit in so much scapular depression. They become so lat dominant that they're desperately seeking something that's going to drive their shoulder blades up. So if that's the case, I'm giving them more reaching, more overhead stuff to kind of counteract it.
Cool.
That's very good stuff. So really, it's just kind of case by case situation. If you're doing that lift and that's killing that kid, find something else. Like don't push him through that. Like not everybody's like my shoulder's the same way. I can't do anything over my head. I mean, it's very lightweight, and I find the right angle with my hands or anything else like that to kind of open up that shoulder to where I can do that movement. But I think that's the thing is like, right, so like with the baseball kids, you're definitely not dealing with as many as the football team, so you could find an exercise for that kid, you know, if he's struggling.
Yeah, and I think it's also short-sighted to assume that like baseball always takes precedence, right? What happens if you get a 3-sport athlete? You get a football, basketball, baseball kid. Like, I'll be honest, like when I was at the University of Connecticut 2003 to 2005, basketball was mostly what I worked with. We did a lot of overhead presses. You know, all the time those guys spend overhead, they need it. It was helpful for them. So, you know, I think there's nothing wrong with kind of going in and off season in your strength and conditioning stuff as well. But, you know, sometimes you just have to ask, you know, why are you using your bullet there, right? I think we can all agree, like, you know, bench press is good. Does it really hold that much water with respect to how successful we'll be at the, you know, at the football level? Like, can we get just as much by training other patterns, maybe in the standing position, whatever it may be? And you know, that's obviously a point that's open to debate. But I think it's something that I'm willing to give on a little bit if it makes the program safer.
You touched on it a little bit earlier. You said that you guys implement the safety squat bar. What is your preference? So do you prefer that over a straight bar squat? You know, because I don't know if anybody out there knows, we do sell the SS yoke bar here at EliteFTS.com.
That's right.
There we go.
So what do you like on the yoke bar or the safety squat bar, and what benefits do you see, especially with baseball players?
Yeah, so if we look at the injury mechanism as baseball, it's that laid back position. It's when you take your arm back to full external rotation. We basically, you know, put our elbow in a pretty vulnerable position with valgus stress, and we also create some anterior instability at the shoulder and kind of reproduce the injury mechanism for superior labrum injuries, right? So we get that classic peel back mechanism, internal impingement, whatever you want to call it. So my feeling is we use our bullets pretty well just from throwing, right? That in and of itself is going to be, enough of a stressor on the arm. So why would you do that in the weight room as well? I'd much rather get guys into positions where they can safely load. We're going to train stability in those positions, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we need to do it with a crazy amount of weight on our back. So safety squat bar, front squat grip. We use giant cambered bar, which I love. That might be my favorite bar ever to squat on. That was an EliteFTS purchase back in the day. So those are all great options for loading guys without provoking, shoulder and elbow pathologies. And just speaking anecdotally, like my shoulder is a classic internal impingement diagnosis. It came from me playing high school tennis, and it's never loved back squatting. And I've been able to work around it with safety squat bars for, 16, 17 years now.
Nate, you program those in a lot as well. Do you kind of feel the same way as far as, especially working with, you did a lot of throws, athletes when you were at Buffalo. Did you guys use that for basically the same reasoning?
Yeah, definitely. So we would teach them with a straight bar, and then after we redid the room and I had all the bars that I wanted, after we taught them to squat with a straight bar, they might see a straight bar maybe once a month, just for those exact same reasons. There's no, like Eric said about the bullets. Yeah. Use your bullets on the field, throwing or wrestling or getting your arm ripped over your head on the mat. There's no reason to go in the weight room and duplicate that stress. So like I said, once they learned how to squat, then they could usually pick up the other bars pretty easy, because most of the cues are the same. Yep. You know what I mean? They're a little bit off, but right. Yeah, they would see a straight bar maybe once a month after they were kind of hit the ground running.
The other thing too that's nice about the safety squat bar, so think about it this way, like you can go to a front squat grip if you got like a classic internal impingement problem. But if you put a front squat grip on someone with an AC joint injury, that's not going to go well. Direct trauma on that. You can put a safety squat bar on just about anybody. Like there isn't a shoulder, and it's where I use it a lot too. To be honest, is like if we get an early post-op Tommy John guy where they're still in the brace, especially when you have the lawn handle on the bars that you guys sell, you can have one hand stabilizing out in front. The other hand can be completely free.
Sure.
So we've been able to use that early on in post-op scenarios for guys. You won't throw a shoulder guy in, under that for a while, but for an elbow surgery, we can use a safety squat bar to maintain the training effect early on. That's been clutch for us.
Nice. Now, would that go the same as for the bench press? Do you find the straight bar bench press a little bit more difficult than, say, like a football bar with more of a neutral grip? Do you like using boards? Any kind of shorten that stroke? Where are you at as far as the bench press, and what tools are you using for that?
Yeah, to be honest, I do very little benching with our guys. And it has actually less to do with like the fixed bar, neutral bar, anything like that. It has just a lot more of my preference for wanting to use exercise that allow people to rotate their scapula freely. I think what we realize is if you think about a bench press, right, they teach you to pin your shoulder blades down and back, get underneath you. If you even look at the actual path of the humerus on a bench press, particularly using like a classic powerlifting style arch, you might only get to about 80 degrees of shoulder flexion, even less if you've got a good arch and you're good at shortening the range of motion. And we throw a baseball at 90 degrees or above for the most part. So I'd much rather have something that allows us to train that scapular positioning. So we might do some like one-arm dumbbell bench press. We might do it like a one-arm bench press with a bridge, something like that. But a lot more of our pressing stuff is landmine stuff. It's cable presses. It's push-up variations. Things along the bottoms up carries. We'll use Turkish get-ups instead of presses. So that's kind of where my head's at on that one.
That makes sense. And then you obviously any kind of a deadlift movement, you'd probably prefer a trap bar. Is that kind of where you're at? I mean, I know most of your guys aren't wearing Metal King deadlifters. Yeah. So the trap bar, I mean, it seems like most sport coaches are kind of going to that trap bar lift and taking that deadlift completely out of the equation.
Yeah, I'm not saying against using straight bar stuff. We always start guys with a trap bar. For us, that's a teaching tool. But we'll pull sumo, we'll pull conventional sometimes. We might do it from blocks. Yeah. So I have no problem with that. But I'm not inherently married to it. But we'll use a lot of like accommodating resistance as well. We'll pull against bands. We'll pull against chains. If not for the actual accommodating resistance, even just for the variety that guys get. So there's plenty of ways to get variety, even if you're just using a trap bar.
And Nate, where are you at with that? A lot of the high schools that you're dealing with, have you kind of moved them all over to the trap bar, or are you still kind of sticking with a straight bar on that?
I don't like the trap bar. It's not a bad exercise, but I think a lot of times what happens is it turns into like a close stance quarter squat.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Especially as they get up heavier. So like a deadlift,
Yeah.
we're trying to go posterior chain.
Yeah.
But when they use that trap bar, their hips scoot forward underneath them. They get into their knees and stuff. So that's kind of why I tried it. So usually we'll just do like pin pulls, and then as
Yep.
they get better at it, we'll move them down.
Yep.
We'll do speed work with some full range stuff if they're ready for it. But yeah, deadlifts I think are I think they're a great exercise.
Big one.
Good total body, strengthener and kind of again take some load off of the shoulders and actually help your upper back over time.
Yeah.
Eric, are you programming in any Olympic lifts right now, or you kind of stay away from that? Just
We don't.
Time.
No, I've kind of been outspoken about it. And it to be honest, has less to do with our ability to teach it or not teach it in our business model. So I wrote an article back in like 2009. It was called What I Learned in 2009, ran in 2010. And one of the things I observed was like, there are a lot of guys who throw 95 who have like 18-inch vertical jumps. And it makes no sense to me.
Yep.
And so I just kind of put out this idea that power was plane specific. And then sure enough, right after it was published, I got an email from a guy who was like, hey, I'm doing my master's thesis on this. I was like, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, we're finding zero correlation between these traditional like sagittal plane power tests, vertical jump, broad jump, stuff like that, sprinting speed, and throwing velocity. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And sure enough, he published it. His name's Graham Lehman. It ran in the Journal of Strength Edition Research in 2012. And so it just kind of verified what we were kind of already seeing, that power was very plane specific. So my feeling is for something as technically advanced as the Olympic lifts, with a pretty good injury risk, if we're talking about valgus stress on the elbow with a snatch, you get some wrists that get pretty well dinged up on catching cleans and stuff like that. I'd much rather devote that time to, training it a little bit more like rotation, whether it's, Haydn/skater jumps, a lot of aggressive med ball stuff. I mean, you can do med ball clean toss, you do kettlebell swings, you can train power, maybe not as optimally as you would get with an Olympic lift, but you can still get a lot of those benefits with a lot less injury risk and a much less teaching intensive environment.
I don't even know why I ask, but how much Olympic lifting do you programming in? Are you putting anything in right now, or are you just kind of sticking with the basics, especially with the high school level?
Me?
Yeah, oh yeah.
None. Fuck that shit.
How do you really feel, man?
Fucking waste of time. It's a waste of fucking time. It's just like he said, I've never seen the carryover. I've been asked to put it in the past, and we put it in, and the results were no better than when we did it. All of our indicators, the kids complain about it. They don't like it. So we don't mess with it.
I think it's just challenging too, like especially nowadays where sports are getting so much more specialized and the competitive calendar is so much longer. Like I might be entirely different if I was like an NCAA football strength coach and I had like a shorter competitive season. I knew I had 9 months to work on this stuff with guys. Like I might be more inclined to put it in there, especially that's a more sagittal plane dominant sport. It's a really tough sell for me in a rotational world.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I'm on the same page there with you guys on that. I guess the next big question I got is, Eric, you've probably seen this the most, is what is the magic number for a kid to play baseball, right? Like these kids playing 80 games this summer, I pulled my kid back on that. I was just like, dude, there's just no reason for you to play that many games. You still have to be a kid. And, back during those years of, I'd say, 8 to 14, I think is when they really go crazy. He would be playing baseball and football and basketball. And I'm like, dude, there's time for everything. I see a lot of guys are kind of getting, specialization's the worst thing in the world. Some people believe in it. But as far as your father and your girls are going to come to you and, they're going to want to play travel softball. I mean, what do you feel is that adequate number is for these kids to play? And maybe it's not, maybe there isn't a number, maybe just it's a kid by kid basis. But for me, I always worry about that kid burning out or peaking too early or starting to resent mom and dad. And like my whole life is sitting at this ballpark, traveling all over the state, to chase that trophy.
Yeah, I think it's tough because guys have been successful both ways. Certainly we know there's more injuries when you specialize, right? If you run fast, you're going to pull your hamstrings, right? You have to kind of accept the risk to some degree, but I think it's all about when you do it, right? So I don't have a problem with a kid specializing at 17, 18. I have a huge problem with them doing it at 13, 14. And that's the challenge we look at. It's funny, we have a kid, Tyler Beatty, who's been one of our guys since his freshman year of high school. And Ty started up with us. He was a 3-sport athlete, both of his first 2 years at school. Junior year, he only played baseball, and he actually regretted it and went back and he was a long snapper and wide receiver on his high school football team. He was a first-round pick in the spring in baseball. He's in the big leagues with the Giants now. So, you can do it different ways. I do think, I'll say this from a baseball development standpoint, and you're in Ohio, so you got a little bit of the weather on your side, to be honest. Give me that kid who's a fall sport athlete. Season wraps up at Thanksgiving time. He can get started on a good throwing program. I don't know when you guys start in Massachusetts. It's the third Monday in March. The high school season gets going. So you backtrack that out. I mean, you've got a lot of time to develop between, effectively November 25th and March 20th. If you can't get a heck of a lot stronger, faster, and optimize mechanics, take BP, do all the things you need to do, like that's a pretty good competitive window. Play baseball from, March 20th until effectively first week in August, have some family time, decompress, get right back into, football preseason. I was a 2-sport athlete myself. I was fall spring as well. And I always felt like it worked. You could do a little bit of both in the wintertime if you wanted to. So I think that tends to work well for a long time for athletes. The new breed of athlete is like, we're going to specialize in 3 sports at once. My buddy Mike's a physical therapist in Massachusetts, and he was joking about it. He's like, yeah, we see a lot of those kids. Yeah. Ones that they got the ankle issue from basketball, the elbow issue from baseball, and the concussions from football. Right. So it's crazy.
And Nate, how are you going to handle that with your kids? I mean, they're getting to that age where they're going to start playing. How do you it's tough to tell a kid enough is enough, especially when they love it. But you always have that fear, like, are you doing too much? Are you doing too much? I mean, how are you going to handle that with your kids? Because you're probably getting there right now with, I'm sure Rocco's getting to that point right now.
Yeah, it's tough. I want to spread it out and do a bunch of sports, but all he wants to do is basketball right now. You know what I mean? And the kid's found something that he likes. So when I'm going to tell him, like, nope, we're gonna play catch with the football today. No basketball. I think what I'll try to do is let them do what they're really into, and then try to balance it out with some sensible training. Yeah. They're starting to show a little bit of interest in the training stuff. So, if that's all he wants to do, then fine. But we're going to kind of counteract those things that he's going to have to do in basketball with a little bit of training. Same with my girls. Yeah. They're into the dance real big. So, like my daughter, she'll come home and say, "Oh, my back's bothering me." Well, I kind of tell her, "Okay, we're gonna have to start doing some stuff." Yep. But we're not getting too heavy into the leagues yet. Like anything they've done is just maybe 2-3 times a week. Yeah. So it's nothing real heavy. It's none of the travel league stuff yet, but I'm sure that's coming. So.
I think it's also like specialization implies that it's to the exclusion of something else, right? Sure. And I think we can have this conversation because we're in the strength and conditioning field. Mike Boyle's a good friend, and Mike a while back talked about what he's done for his daughter, and she's a heck of a hockey player. She won a national championship as a freshman, and he was like, my rule was 2 lifts per week from age 11 on. He's like, I don't care how we get it, but we're going to average that 104 per year. And right, there are going to be times when maybe you're in season, you get 0, and we're off season, we're 4. But over the course of the year, we're going to get it in. And I don't think people appreciate when I talk about early sports specialization, that means playing one sport and then doing no training on the side, doing nothing to counteract it. To me, like what we do in a weight room, if it's structured correctly, is like the most rich proprioceptive environment you can imagine, whether it's what we expose them to in the warm-up, we throw med balls, we change direction, we sprint, we jump, we lift stuff in multiple planes. Like we're giving them a different sport right there. So if you're involved in a strength training program, whether your daughter's doing dance or whether your son's playing basketball, I think you're giving them a different sport. You're competing against those overuse injuries.
Yeah, I actually stole that from Boyle. I think that's where I might have heard that.
That's a really good. I haven't heard that. I like that a lot. As a dad with my kid, I always told him, I said, look, dude, as soon as this isn't fun, we're going to find something else. Yeah. Because you're too young to be suffering. You know what I mean? Like you have your whole rest of your life to deal with that. And as soon as it became unfun, we'll move on to something else. You're not obligated to do anything, especially not for my interest.
Have you guys watched the Lance Armstrong documentary just started on Sunday night? Yeah. And it's much more about the doping side of things and all that. It's intriguing in that regard. But I think the one thing that I took away from that first one he actually comments, he's like, I was terrible at every typical athletic sport. He's like, I had no hand-eye coordination. I couldn't play football, basketball, baseball. My mom signed me up for swimming, and I was a 12-year-old in the 6-year-old lanes. And then they just discovered that he was an elite endurance athlete, and there he went. But like, that's the thing I think we have to be cognizant of, is if the kid hates it and he's not good at it, find something different.
Yeah, don't force it.
Yeah.
Like, your relationship with your kid 10 years from now is more important than winning that 12-year-old tournament. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not going to do that to my kid. I never will. So if this sucks, we'll find something else. I mean, Tim, you got some young ones coming up too. I mean, where are you at with that? I mean, you can just try to make them try as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's activity for me. It's like, listen, let's just establish some real good habits. I know sports for me led into now where I exercise every day just for long-term benefits. You know what I mean? So, if one turns out to be a superstar and they like it, fantastic. If they turn out to be a superstar and don't like it, I don't care. Like, do whatever you want. But just for me, it's let's stay healthy.
Sure.
I mean,
I'll tell you, I watched, when my son was very young, I watched Chris Bell's movie, Trophy Kids. And I mean, I think, like, every sport that you every parent should have to watch that, because you see it, and we all go to the park and the fields, and we see that parent, right? I mean, he's just going crazy. The kid's miserable. Everyone's miserable.
Yeah.
It's just it's eye opening, and I always tell people, like, man, just watch that movie. And I mean, if you could stomach it, I had a hard time watching it. I was like, man, this is awful. But I looked at it, I was like, I don't want to be that dad ever.
Yeah.
You know?
I think the coolest thing too is, like, I'm sure you guys have seen this, like, my wife and I'll go in and work out on a Sunday, and we'll bring our girls with us, and we'll be doing our workout, and she'll be like, Daddy, I need a program. So I'll go print her out a random program, and she'll fill in whatever she wants to fill in. But you turn around for 2 minutes and they're pulling each other on the sled. They're like hanging from barbells in the power racks. Like, they'll find entertainment. Like, it's amazing. And for me, I think it's just as important for them to see mommy and daddy, like, exercising. It's an important part of our lives, and I want it for them to be that way for them as well. But to me, it's shocking, like, at age 5, how many different things they'll expose them to just when we walk in that facility. So, you hope that they still have that kind of, like, interest in, semi-guided discovery as they get older.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to make it fun. I mean, Nate, I see you, your kids are dragging sleds up and down the street. I just saw Joe DeFranco posted, like, a mini third grade, what do they used to call those things? The games they had at the end of school. What was that game at the end of school year? They're like, hey, everybody got there. Field day.
Field day.
He did the third grade field day. He had his daughters out there pushing his truck and doing all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, you just make it fun. I mean, Nate, your kids are totally into it, right? I mean, they just enjoy doing what dad's doing, right?
Yeah, well, I've always been lucky. Like, when I was coaching, they were allowed to hang around in the weight room. So, like, they would see the athletes doing it. In the gym I go to now, they have like a turf section and CrossFit section and stuff. So, like, I can go in and train, and they'll go hang out with some of the trainers, and I'll walk out, and the one girl that works there has my daughter on a rower and stuff. So it really is not even me. I've just been lucky to be in good spots where other people are there doing it, so they make it look cool. I don't have to tell them that training school. They've always been in a good environment for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's funny you bring up, I dealt with a good number of kids in the college section who did not like their sport anymore. And I would always ask them, well, when did you start doing this? And they were like 6, wrestlers and swimmers. They're like, I hate the sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we have a guy who trains at our gym. He spent a few years in the league, and he ended up retiring because he had a bunch of concussion issues. But I was asking him the one day, because my son was asking about playing football, and he's 9, and I'm not real keen about it, just yet. But I was asking this dude that was in the league, it's like, when did you start playing football? And he said 8. And I go, do you think it was too early? And he goes, yeah, definitely. He goes, if you just, like, keep your kids active and in any type of general sport where they run and jump and play, they can start up in middle school and be fine. Right. He said it was good because he was a big kid, so he always had to go against the older kids, so that made him better. But he said, as far as being a good football player, he said, you don't need to start that early.
I think the other thing people make the mistake of is like comparing their kids to other kids. And I have like the best case study ever. I have twins, right? We have a blonde, and they've been different since they were in the womb.
Yeah.
Like one of them was like front and center, face against the glass on the ultrasound. The other one was like hidden, barely could find her heartbeat. And one's blonde, one's brunette. And what's been interesting is watching them. One of them walked like 6 months before the other. So we were all kind of like worried. One of them didn't walk till she was 17 months old. And then now it's interesting. One of them is very good with like dexterity. The other one is bigger. She's a little more clumsy. Basically one swam way before the other one. One rode a bike before the other one. One's better at soccer. It's just one throws well, one hits well. Like, and they should have been identical, according to like this model we put in our head of how we compare people. And they've been apart by 6 to 12 months on like, major like landmark skills for kids in development. So when I use that example with parents, I feel like it always kind of brings them back down to earth. Like your kid will get there. Just follow the right processes.
Yeah. I just don't know what changed. I mean, when I was growing up and I was playing, like my parents never talked to my coaches. It just, I don't know. It just seemed different. Like we played to have fun. Like the thought of me playing college, I was way too small to do any of that, but it was never a thought in my head. It was like, I just wanted to play with my buddies and, be a part of that team. And it seems like this has all become a job for these kids. And it's hard to watch. And they all feel they're like a failure if they do not go on to play at the next level. And it's for me, it's getting hard to watch. And I just don't know what has changed. I don't know if it's just because the value of a college education is shot through the roof and the costs are so excessive. The parents are chasing that. I tell my one buddy, I'm like, everything you've spent for that kid in that sport, you could have saved that money and you would have had his college paid for.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's the saying? It's like keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like if they bought a nice station wagon, you had to go buy a nice station wagon. The difference is like it wasn't so front and center what you knew you had to keep up with. Right. There wasn't Instagram, there wasn't Twitter when all of us were coming up. And what people don't realize is what you see on Instagram, like we see it all the time in the baseball community. Like you'll see these guys who like throw this video up of them throwing like 96 mile an hour heater and then like an absolute disgusting breaking ball. And they don't realize that those were 2 out of 30 pitches in the bullpen.
That's right.
The other 28 like went over the scoreboard.
Exactly.
Yep. And so you only see people at their absolute best. And I think that's what we see is we see people holding themselves to even higher standards. And that can be a good thing or a terrible thing, because it's parents holding kids to those standards too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough. I mean, my son got to the point where he was like, don't even post a picture of me on Instagram or Facebook. He's like, I don't want anything out there of me. So, I always kind of make the fun. I'm like, oh, here's the kid I'm not allowed to tag. But good for him. He decided, he loves sports, watches sports religiously, but I want to go to a big school, and he's concentrated on his grades and everything else, and that's kind of been his motivating factor. So I think all kids, like you said, Eric, they're just wired differently, and you can't compare them to somebody else, you know what I mean? And, the freak athlete's the freak athlete. You're going to know it. I mean, it's not like they just pop up one day. I mean, that kid was a freak at 9 as he is at 18. I mean, that eyeball test is there, and it's real, and I mean, I think parents got to be a little bit realistic with that.
Yeah, and I think that there's the other side to that too. Is like we have a lot of guys that I know who have literally gotten completely surprised when they get to pro ball. There's so many kids that have never gotten out of their small town. They're the best athlete in the history of their town, and then all of a sudden you sign and you go to professional baseball, and you realize that holy cow, there are a lot of guys outside the U.S. that play baseball too, and every one of these guys was the best player in the history of their town.
It's a big world.
Unless your name's Mike Trout, baseball is going to be really hard.
Right? Yeah. Yep. And I guarantee he was that freak, right? I'm sure he was like that when he was 9.
Hey, there were a bunch of teams that passed over him. He was a late first rounder, so they're wrong a lot more than they're right. Let's say that.
Right.
Hey, I think Mason, who is our in-house strength and conditioning specialist, has some questions here for the guys.
Nice.
Mason,
Fire away, young Mace.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm the strength and conditioning editorial intern is the position. So I jumped at the position to ask you something, Eric, because you're up there in terms of people to listen to. But so I'm just gonna go ahead with some questions that came up for this.
Sure, let's do it.
You've worked basically every category of strength conditioning for pro now, a bunch of private stuff. But as the person who's worked with people whenever they're not in their season or with their normal strength conditioning coach? How do you balance like that in between? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of transfer in between. I'm sure you reach out to their coaches, and just any tips for that person who has them for half the year or 1/3 of the year when someone else has them for the rest.
Yeah, I think, it's funny. I've been on the player side, and I've obviously been on the team side now. And the team side didn't start until a little bit later into the off season. So maybe haven't had a full off season under my belt. I can tell you one of the things I think has made us successful as a business has been our accessibility. In fact, I asked one of the agents who's been one of our biggest referral sources over the years, and I said, "Hey, why do you refer to us?" And I expect him to say baseball specific expertise or something like that. And he's like, "You always answer on the first ring, and you always shoot me straight." So I think there are a lot of people that count on you to give them feedback, even if it's just a 60-second iPhone voice memo that you send over to an agent about the guy that he referred to or something like that. So I've always tried to do that. I think what you have to be cognizant of is particularly on the professional side, that it's you work for the player when you're in the private sector. So you want to make sure you have their permission to share that information ahead of time, because there are times that you're confident in their corner. And obviously I'm at the other end of that spectrum when I'm with the team. And that's why it's so important to develop relationships with players so they understand that you really have their best interest in mind. So I think you always communicate, but you communicate in the capacity that the player prefers. So I always come back to I'm a player advocate and I'm an educator even more than I am a strength coach. So I think if I do that, a good job of that and actually talking with the player, that's going to set everything else up, further down the line for success.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. What's the biggest difference in your programming or coaching now versus 10 years ago?
Holy cow. I think I have a better perception of not getting emotionally attached to things that I did in my training, right? If you looked at my programming back in 2009, 10, still kind of heavy in the thick of my powerlifting career, I thought the solution was everyone just needed to squat, bench, and deadlift as much as they could. We just do dumbbell bench press instead for baseball players. And I think we've realized there's a lot more to it. It's the positions you get into. Those foundational strength things are important, but I'd say the biggest thing you'll look at is, there's a higher focus on movement quality as opposed to just being strong. I think that's something that's made us really successful in that regard. I think the other thing too is just the synergy. I'm really fortunate to have so many good people around me that I can leverage the expertise of manual therapists and physical therapists and pitching coordinators. We can use a lot more of the technology that wasn't there 10 years ago to make our guys better too.
Cool. You might have already covered this. I wasn't able to hear everything you guys were saying, but I know you talked about the difference between positions, at least with your players. What's the getting more specific with core or torso work or whatever you want to call it with your really rotational guys, like your pitchers? How different does that end up looking compared to someone who plays someone who just sprints or something like that, like a track athlete?
It's quite a bit different. I think inherently you have different kinds of core work, right? You have anti-rotation, you have anti-extension, and you obviously train anti-extension in both populations. You probably have to train the anti-rotation aspect of it a lot more. So how are you using classic core stabilization exercise with a stronger component of either hip or thoracic spine motion? I think we would train. The other thing we would look at is how are we doing things ballistically, right? So it's not enough just to do chops and lifts on the cables. We need to throw med balls and actually train at higher speeds that we can actually simulate some of that hip shoulder separation that our rotational athletes are really facing.
Sense. I don't know. I know, of course, Nate is the conjugate guy in strength and conditioning, but how much does your periodization, there's always that balance between what would be theoretically ideal. If you could pull them completely out of their lives and run the best program ever, quote, at least especially now with a professional team, how close are you in between balancing the actual part of their life and the real world scheduling conflicts versus your theoretical program? How does your periodization, would it be different between those two?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is that every single program I've written in my entire training career has been a conjugate model, right? And basically you're training multiple qualities in the same session. And really what the conjugate model allows you to do is to prioritize certain qualities over others during specific points of the year without detraining any of them. So there may be times when we phase out, like I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of sets of 15 for guys during the middle of the season, but we're still going to be training power sparingly at those times. And there are other times we're going to really amp up for it. So, that's the first, I think, answer to that question is that, these aren't just a bunch of linear periodization programs. That's probably the most important thing I borrowed from my powerlifting career because it certainly worked so well back then. I'm not sure if I necessarily understand the rest of the question, but how are we taking into account what's happening in their lives, in the context of the gym? It's kind of a lame answer, but it's communication. Mm-hmm. It's touching base with your guys. Like a best example I can give you, one of our big league guys, his hamstrings was a little bit cranky when he came in to throw a pen yesterday, and we pushed it back a day. And the reason was very simple. He's got a pregnant wife at home and his dad was sick. Like he had 2 basically crazy sleepless nights with 2 kids at home that weren't feeling well either. And he was trying to help out his wife. And, we're all locked down in the middle of a crazy time in this world. So it's not like he can just defer to the nanny or something like that. So we just listened to his body and we changed things up. But you don't get to have those conversations if you've only known an athlete for 2 days. You don't know that he even has a family or anything like that. So we try really hard to, to make sure that the relationships are what underpin everything we do from a training standpoint.
If I guess this is a hard question because it's almost impossible to put like a quantity on, but is that one of your big priorities, like communication with them to make programming decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. We have a giant hashtag that says CSP family in a decal on the wall. Like, I don't want people to just think that it's a transactional relationship. We don't want to just train people. I think if you look at any industry, but particularly the fitness industry, you have 2 broad approaches to building your business. You have value extraction, you have value addition. I stole this from my buddy Pat Rigsby. Value extraction says, hey, this guy got here on January 2nd. We're doing a crash course with him for the 6 weeks before spring training. I might never see him again after 6 weeks. Should I charge him everything I possibly can to extract as much value? And we've done the exact opposite of that. I've thought more, how can I over deliver in this 6-week block so that he realizes this is a great place to be, so that he'll want to come back. He'll want to bring teammates with him. He'll want his wife to come in and train with us. When the day comes, he'll want us to train his kids. He'll want to tell his agent about us. And that's how we built our business. And what's nice about that too, is you can always really sleep at night knowing you've done the right thing. So I've always tried to do that. Whether it's a minor leaguer who doesn't have a penny to his name or, a big leaguer with a $300 million contract, I think you have to really develop relationships and make them part of a family and, make them appreciate that you're there to help them get to where they want to be.
Yeah, I follow you and Pete, so I know kind of your general, at least values, and I've always thought that was something that was awesome because you don't compromise. You have your delivery, you could sleep at night like you said, but you also are obviously undeniably a powerhouse for your strength and conditioning.
Well, it's funny too. I'm going to throw a Dave Tate shout out in here. Back when we opened our gym, 2007, summer of 2007, we ordered our stuff from EliteFTS, and there were safety squat bars in there. There were giant camber bars in there, and you know why? Because we always said that our training model would dictate our business model and not vice versa, right? A safety squat bar costs more than a regular barbell, right? You can mass produce those things and, it's just the nature of it. But we always said that we wanted to deliver an experience first and foremost, and that we would sort our business model out around that. I think there's something to be said about that from the get-go, and it's something we've always really rigidly adhered to.
Yeah, awesome. I guess, You may not reflect it in how you look, but you've probably been in the game a while. So have you seen a trend in like average problems, whether they're physical or mental? Like, are you addressing something a lot more these days than you saw when you first started in athletes?
Yeah, the game has evolved. I mean, we're seeing a lot of times you have such crazy velocities with arm speed that we're seeing injuries in sports medicines trying to keep up with them, right? Certainly there's been a surge in lat strains over the last couple of years. We see more cases of thoracic outlet, both in terms of guys probably actually developing symptoms and it being better diagnosed. Certainly we're seeing more femoral acetabular impingement cases being treated surgically than ever before. That's probably because of, early sports specialization on top of better diagnostic measures, on top of, athletes, pushing hard in the weight room, on top of their rotational sports. So certainly the sports medicine side of things is something that you have to constantly stay on top of, because it's crazy to think, but we are evolving in terms of how we actually injure things by playing the sport at even higher levels. I can't recall the number right off the top of my head, but I want to say that the average major league player right now is almost 20 pounds heavier than he was like 20 years ago. So that just the sheer volume of, average fastball velocity goes up every year. Launch angle and exit velocities are something that we're honing in on now, so we can optimize swings and guys can square up baseballs at a whole other level that they never used to in the past. So baseball is much, much different in that regard.
Cool. Well, that's the questions I had prepared. I don't know what's came in through Instagram and stuff. If it's
actually, Matt did a really good job of crossing those off the list, but we've got some burning questions here for some guys here, and it's
nice.
Did you get a chance to meet George Costanza when working for the Yankees?
I wish, man. Although I will say this, I have a funny story. Like, there was one day when I got there in spring training, and I actually didn't have my parking pass yet, so they didn't have like a normal spot. So they were kind of having me pull over to the dirt spot on the side. I'm like, I'm doing like my George Costanza, thinking about whether I'm getting the best parking spot or not. So couldn't help but think about it.
Sleep under the desk. He showed us how to do that. And then the last one here from this end was, the guys want to know who's stronger, Aaron Judge or Stanton?
Those guys are both impressive athletic specimens.
Unbelievable, aren't they?
Yeah, they're and you know what? They're real big dudes. That's the other thing that's hard to appreciate. You can see guys on TV, and I don't know if the pinstripes maybe make them look a little smaller than they are, but and both wonderful guys too, who have been really, really bought in and welcomed us with open arms. And we've got some new people in house, so it's been a lot of fun to work with them.
Yeah, I think we could get those guys on stage.
You never know, man. I'll say this. I think they're both pretty competitive dudes, so they're going to have some outlet for all that competition when baseball wraps up someday for them. So
that's right.
I don't know.
Bodybuilders hit their peak at about 40, so they should be out.
Is that what it is? Holy cow!
I think so.
I wouldn't put it past, especially Stanton. That's a dude that can put on muscle mass like it's like nobody else. So it's impressive.
And Judge was a 3-sport athlete.
He was an excellent athlete.
Yes, at all 3 levels.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. Our strength coach actually sent me some video of Aaron sprinting in the outfield the other day. It was a wider angle just so you could kind of see him working at top speed, and it was Tony Gonzalez from 30 yards away.
Right.
He looked like he'd go play tight end in the NFL right now.
Monsters, man.
But yeah, impressive guys and super athletes too.
Well, very cool, Eric. I really appreciate you taking the time. You've been a great supporter of us over the years. Dave appreciates it. We appreciate it.
And if people want to find out more about your programs, and where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so ericcressey.com is the website. CresseySportsPerformance.com is the facility. And then the podcast is just EliteBaseballPodcast.com. It's a lot of interviews with like pro guys, sports scientists, people in the game and stuff too. So if you're a baseball nerd like me, that's a good listen for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Nate, Conjugate U, best way to get a hold of you?
Nate Harvey 2600 on the gram. Eric, I got to give you some props too. I got about 10 DMs when we put the post up that you were coming on.
Yeah,
my old baseball guys. They're all calling me big time. So you got me a little baseball street cred. So I appreciate it.
Very nice. Least I can do, man. Thanks so much for having me, fellas.
Eric, awesome, man. Appreciate it, man. And if you need anything from us at any time, just give us a buzz.
Awesome. Everybody be safe. Okay.
All right, guys.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Take care, guys.